One of the most important pieces of advice I could give you is the virtue of taking a break, leaving your computer, and coming back later, even if it's for just 5 minutes. Because the longer you work on something, the more used to it you become, and you see the problems less and less. But when you take a break, you come back with fresh eyes, and it is so worth doing that. So when it comes to this sculpture, just the few minutes I've taken between the first video and this one, I can tell a few things are wrong proportionally. So the pectoral fin is bigger in the sculpture than it is in the artwork. It's also further back on the body. So let's move that. I think I'll try and mask it off first with the B box select, and then switch over to my pin, and let's mask out the rest. And I might need to make this pretty smooth actually. So maybe hit the A pie menu. Let's grow the mask a little bit, Shift R, and then A, smooth the mask. All right, Control I to invert, and I am going to move this with, let's see, I'll just do it with the move brush, or the transform operator rather. So we'll move the whole thing forward. Whoops. Shift right click to place the pivot. Let's move it forward. Let's rotate it a little bit. And then also scale. I don't know where the scale option is. Let's just choose the scale operator by itself. There we go. That's already feeling much better. While the mask is still intact, yeah, I think that's going to work. Alt-M. We can smooth out the areas around it with the G grab brush. Maybe Control-R to remesh. And actually, maybe I'll remesh with even more geometry. Let's go to 0.02, Control-R. There we go. All right, so that's a better placement. I kind of flattened out the area around it, which I don't love. Let's use the inflate brush to kind of puff that back out. But also take a look at the silhouette kind of behind this pectoral fin. I think this needs to be brought up a little bit with a very big brush. Yeah, that's feeling a little bit better. The whole face area needs to be brought down. Ooh, yeah, that's already helping a lot. Okay. I think that's going to be it for now in terms of big proportional changes. I don't want the bottom to flatten out too much. I want to keep that nice and rounded. But there we go. Fresh eyes, definitely something worth implementing. There's no badge of honor for working 3 hours straight and never taking a break. All right, let's get into the face, because that's the most complicated part of this sculpture. The fins are pretty easy, but the face takes a significant step up in complexity. So I'm gonna kind of pull this out. I don't think I ever made the face kind of thick enough in width. Hold Shift. You know, if you see this kind of lumpiness that came from the remesh modifier, just holding Shift and kind of clicking around to lightly smooth that stuff out. And the first thing I need, kind of a reference point to direct the entire face, is the smile line in the mouth. Also, at this point, I think I will switch over to dynamic topology, because that's going to handle our details much better. And I like having them isolated in the face, not needlessly remeshing the rest of the shark. So we're going to enable dynamic topology. Forgot to delete the UVs, or disable that setting in the icosphere operator. So UV maps, let's remove it. Re-enable dynamic topology. If you can't tell, that warning kind of bothers me and I try to avoid it. So I need to sculpt a line here. And I believe this is going to be a reason why I would use a different type of detailing, which I know recently I said I never do that, but that's what I get for saying that. The reason it would make more sense to use constant detail here is because I want to draw this smile line, but I want to be far away from the model so that I can see it in relation to the artwork. And so this is one of the very specialized situations where I will use constant before switching to my preferred relative detail. So I need to choose a resolution. I forget if it's higher. Yeah, okay, that should be good. So Shift C will go to the crease brush, and I'm looking for a reference point for where the corner of the mouth is, just kind of eyeballing it. And then let's hold control. And of course, I started from a default scene, so I need to change the default behavior of this brush to plus per my preference. And let's start drawing in the smile line. Again, I'm taking this kind of sketch approach, not making one line, but kind of repeating the process as you would a sketch. I think that's a pretty good placement. Pretty good start to the mouth shape. All right. Now from the front, it kind of has this whale slash dolphin, appearance to it. So I think I need to pull out the sides so that we get less of a point and more of a rounded shape. So make sure I do that with a broad brush just to keep everything nice and smooth, holding shift and kind of stippling some smooth operations. All right, let's reinforce that crease one more time. And I want to go back to my preference of relative detail. Also, I think that a detail size of probably 8 is where I want to start. Keep it broad before lowering that level for a higher density. And I think that's a good start for now. Let's use the mask brush to isolate the upper half of the mouth. I'm just going to paint this out by hand and then spread out the influence just so that I can work with all of the upper half. All right, Control I to invert. Now, one thing about me is that seeing visually the darkness of the mask can kind of throw off my sense of proportion. So once I make a mask, I do like to turn off overlays so I don't see that, but the mask is still in play and I will not be able to sculpt down here. I just like not seeing the mask. So with the top kind of masked off, I can use the snake hook brush to pull out a snout, very clearly kind of poking up like a mountaintop. And then with the crease brush, I'm going to cut a crease kind of across the bridge of the nose, so to speak. I know I'm putting human terminology onto animal anatomy, but it's also sort of personified, isn't it? And so something you'll see me do a lot with the crease brush is I cut the crease and then immediately smooth in the surrounding borders of that crease. All right, let's use the pinch brush to kind of make this tighter. And once I've got the basic crease, I'll use grab to kind of pull it into position better. And then the snout is quite straight into that crease, right? So if we zoom in, the snout starts at a point, comes down pretty straight, ends in a point, and then kind of curves up like this. So my favorite method is to achieve that with a grab brush. Let's give the snout a little more width. I like the snout coming to a point, but keeping the lower lip rounded. All right, let's see how that looks proportionally. Still get rid of that grease pencil annotation that I made. All right, I think that's a pretty good start to the face. Now, something to keep in mind about the mouth is that we need room for these teeth to fit. And so I've cut just a sharp line. Let's turn on our overlays and just keep track of the fact that I do still have a mask, Alt-M to clear the mask. And this sharp line is not really going to be, whoops, I'm on clay strips, Shift-C for the crease brush. The sharp line is not enough space for the teeth that we're going to add soon. And so I'm going to turn this crease into a gap with the inflate brush. So I'm going to make the strength pretty high, hold control, and kind of inflate inward. And that's going to make a gap that our teeth will fit into. And then I'm going to smooth out the top a little bit. Maybe decrease the strength of this brush. Because eventually, as noted by the silhouette, the lip is going to kind of puff out. So let's take our inflate brush and do that. At least start to plump it out on the bottom. And we can tell that it's very evident on the front based on the silhouette, but we don't necessarily know how plump it is on the sides. So I'll kind of leave that fading and then we'll come back as we polish to see, to make the final decision on what to do about that. All right, so we've sort of created a gap that will make room for teeth. Now, should we sculpt the teeth as part of this mesh? Absolutely not. That would be a nightmare. For example, if we tried something like this, snake hook brush, and like pull a tooth out, like all of the intersections and transitions in this mesh would be an absolute nightmare to deal with. So do not do that. Instead, let's go to object mode, work smarter, not harder. And we can very quickly model a tooth shape by using a mesh circle. And we'll change the vertices to, let's say 16. And then look from the side view. We'll tab into edit mode, scale this down, and simply E to extrude, scale down, rotate a little bit, E to extrude, scale down, rotate a little bit, E to extrude, M, merge at the center. And then I want to fill this bottom face by alt-clicking to select that ring, and then F to fill it. Control R, let's cut an edge loop as a reinforcing edge. And I can tell the normals are a bit funky, so that must mean that our face orientation is backwards. Red means that it's flipped. Select everything, Shift N, and then Control 2 in the viewport. I will add a subdivision surface modifier with 2 levels. And I actually don't love that point. So maybe I'll cut an edge loop here, slide this down by hitting G twice, and that's going to be much better. All right, so we've got a tooth. Let's turn off that overlay of the face orientation. So this first tooth is going to be in the center. I think the artwork kind of implies that it's central in its location. It's also pretty skinny. So maybe I don't need this holding edge. Let's delete it. Go to 2 for edge selection, on the 2 on the number row, Control X. Yeah, I think it'll be easier for us if it sort of rounds at the bottom of the tooth. We'll never see the rounding, but that harsh edge, can cause some issues with penetration. So let's get rid of that. That's going to work out better, I think. And then S to scale, and then Shift Z twice means I'm scaling in every axis except for Z, and functionally, this will make our tooth a little bit skinnier. Let's scale it up and just kind of eyeball like how it needs to be placed according to the artwork. And that's going to make us pull out the lip on our sculpture. There we go, something like this. And then back to object mode. Let's duplicate with Alt-D. We'll keep the object data shared just in case we ever want to manipulate the mesh, doing it on one, we'll do the same to the other. And that's Alt-D as opposed to Shift-D. Now I need to kind of scale these so that they get squattier as we go towards the corner of the mouth. And so to shrink the height, let's hit SZZ. And then we're going to position, hit R, maybe R twice to go into like tumble rotation. And these placements are not going to be perfect. We just want to get something started because a lot of our facial decisions in the sculpture depend on something being placed here. Alt-D, let's just make our way down. And these teeth are looking better. Maybe a little bit squattier, SZZ. And then Alt-D, let's see, 3 more times. I'll just speed this process up. Okay, I think that's a good initial placement. And now we've got some geometry to help guide what we do with our sculpture. So let's go back to sculpt mode on our shark. And I need to push down the gap that we made a little bit more. So let's make the strength of our inflate brush significant. Push it down. And maybe we will pinch in between the teeth, right? So now that we've got kind of a lip shape started, basically we want the lips to kind of envelop the teeth. Maybe the draw sharp brush will be better because I don't need pinching as much as I just need a sharp kind of push down into the mouth. There we go. Yeah, that's helping. Yeah, because the teeth are starting to touch each other a little bit. And then inflate out the top. Okay, yeah, that's helping smooth it out. And then also, if you consider the shape of the teeth, they would be pushing against the upper half of the mouth. And so it might make sense to take that inflate brush and kind of hold control and push inward. You see that? So the teeth is kind of, pressing against the upper half. And this will all work out together if we inflate in between the teeth, and it'll give this sense that the teeth are being pressed, and all of a sudden this 2D artwork starts to work out very well in 3D. But I'm kind of getting a little ahead of myself, because a problem that I have, and I think a lot of sculptors have, is I can try and advance too much in too little time. Whereas if you progress through the whole sculpture consistently, then you'll maintain a consistent level of quality. And so I'm going to, kind of pull back and not get in too much of a polishing stage, because it's better to do that later. And I need to focus on basically the fundamentals of this sculpture, like what the lip is doing on the bottom half. If it's pushing against the top half, it's also pushing against the bottom half. So maybe we kind of push out the bottom lip. And it's not perfect, but we're starting to get a sense for what this mouth is going to be. I'm happy with that as a start. In the next video, we will add an eye and start to work on some facial anatomy.